Sorry about my absence these past couple of weeks and the inconsistent posting schedule. It is winter down here, and winter means sickness. And anyway, what has also been happening while I have been sick is that in New Zealand there have been a lot of curriculum changes that are about to happen. This first started a couple months back when the New Zealand government announced that they would be making changes to the high school English curriculum. There were a lot of critiques about the curriculum reversing decolonization, not promoting stories with real-world contexts, undiversifying, ignoring students' needs, and disapproving reading for pleasure. And with the curriculum about to be completely overhauled in the next few years, not that it really matters much to me. I currently don't teach English. I don't have any high school aged children, or children at all, I should say. Still, I'm publishing this video in the hope that this could end up inciting some kind of change, because English was admittedly my best subject at school. I mean, duh, I write to earn money. But I'm hoping this will incite change and bring new books into the classroom. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I studied in school and the books that I think should be studied today instead. You might wonder why this is even being talked about, especially when a large amount of my audience is international. Well, there's a lot of things that are coming up that are causing concern. Declining literacy changes in school causing these curriculum changes, and the death of media literacy being among them. I also want to acknowledge before diving into this video the potential factors and the need for well-being support for teachers. I have huge admiration for teachers, full-time teachers and part-time teachers, for their dedication, and the work they do isn't always being recognized in the right ways. I do believe that at least in New Zealand and potentially overseas, they are underfunded and they deserve more resources and more care so that they can look after the kids now and in their futures. Now, I have never taught high school English or even tutored it. It was just one of like the 3 classes that I cared about in high school, mainly because I wanted to get the Creative Writing Award in year 13, which I did. Frankly, the assigned reading texts were my least favorite parts of English, which is the same for a lot of students because a lot of them don't actually read the texts, and that's a problem, I think. I couldn't persuade my friends back then to read the books that were interesting in some ways, and I knew that I couldn't. And I think that may be part of the problem that English students are facing today. It is rare for someone to praise a book that they read in English class, even from someone like me who was a consistent high achiever. I think part of it boils down to curriculum recommendations and what the actual Ministry of Education may be recommending, rather than the kinds of books that will actually get students to read and learn how to comprehend things. I don't feel like those were the kinds of books that I was always given. So as I talk through the books that I read in my high school English classes year after year, I'm also going to be including some recommendations of books that I have read or that I'm about to read that I think will make some good alternatives or good fits for these different year levels. Plus, I'm going to encourage teachers and potentially the Ministry of Education, if this ever reaches them somehow, about the things that they should be focusing on when selecting things for their students to read. Choose stories about your students. For context, the high school that I went to was considered an ethnically diverse one, with lots of students especially from the Pacific Islands, so Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, and all those sorts of countries, and also from Asia. This to me creates a double-edged sword, where the students would really like to see themselves in stories, but they could also benefit from other identities in these stories as well. This can be difficult when these stories are often written during time periods where students cannot relate to themes or emotions present within them. That's not to say that old book equals bad book for these students to study. I just think there needs to be a better awareness and focus on what these students should be interested in instead. For example, if I was an English teacher teaching my year 9s who are 13 and 14 years old, I would give them an Alice Osman novel to study. There are very few authors who are able to capture the experience of growing up as a teen in an online world. And I think her novels include relatable things and depictions of life that the younger generations can relate to. She also includes a lot of diverse casting and intersectionality in her works that people will be able to see themselves in. If I had to pick just one of her novels, I'd go with Radio Silence. This novel depicts battles between creativity and ambition, developing friendships that matter to you, issues surrounding online privacy, and experiences about being a queer teen. This would be, I think, the perfect kind of read to get students started with all the different sorts of things that are required for studying English later down the line. I think choosing a modern story is a very easy way to bring about themes, character arcs, and real-world connections. Make them interesting. Let's face it, the novels that teens pick up in English class are rarely ever novels that they would actually pick up outside the class. This is a challenge that very few English teachers seem to want to try and tackle. The only notable exception that I can think of was while I was looking for examples when studying English in year 11, how Hunger Games was often a novel that was commonly picked and examined in practice exams and in the statistics for the exams that were released to the public. This would have been during the modern dystopia heyday of the 2010s. I did not end up studying the Hunger Games in high school. That was something that I explored much later in my life. This was probably one of the rarest times that teachers could actually get kids engaged because dystopia was a trendy genre. And dystopia is a very common genre, at least in New Zealand, that is studied in English classes, with novels like 1984, The Giver, and The Handmaid's Tale coming up a lot. There was only one time there was a teacher who actually engaged with us and ended up allowing us to choose the book that we wanted to pick up. That was in year 10, when I was 14 going on 15. This was probably one of the rare instances where everyone read the assigned book because we were given a selection of 5 books to choose from. Granted, this isn't always a feasible option, especially for some of the more higher education qualifications like NCEA levels 1 through 3, which is being changed to some advanced education certificates in the coming years or something. And also, we were an advanced learning class for English. I will say this, that there were 2 novels off the top of my memory that were the most chosen. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime and Tomorrow When the War Began, which was my pick. From what I remember, this is what drew in people to each. Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime had a unique and interesting writing style that appeals to a lot of people who read it. It also had a mystery element to it and an autistic protagonist. Ultimately, I think it was the unique writing style that drew people in. Versus Tomorrow When the War Began. It was a high-action book, and thus the closest book available to me, like the fantasy books that I was reading at the time in high school. It felt the most cinematic out of the books that we were reading, and I was hooked. We were given this book as it surrounded themes of war, coming of age, and morality. This was the most cinematic read for the class to pick up during a period where every story everywhere was full of cinematic action. This story is genuinely something that I want to consider going back to read. I want to see if I still like it as an adult. And apparently there's more books in the series, which I only started reading the second book until I got triggered by something that happened because I didn't like violence back then, gore, I should say. I didn't like gore back then. I think what teens are actually interested in needs to come into consideration when picking what books classes should be studying. Like the social issues of today that teens would be interested in, combined with the genres that they want to read. I do not really interact with teens in my day-to-day anymore to work out what they're collectively interested in, but I'd wager that they'd be interested in a book like All That's Left in the World by Eric J. Brown. It's got high stakes, queer representation, and many ways to look at and reflect on humanity within the books. Plus it's a post-apocalypse, which The Last of Us being streamed on TV means that it's at least somewhat popular. Break the genre bias. On that note, there is a major bias that English teachers have. And honestly, studying English as a whole, there's about 3 genres that they will always pick for when studying English texts: historical fiction, contemporary fiction, and sci-fi. And not even like the cool space sci-fi normally, it's the dystopian sci-fi. I do not know why they stick to this. For why some genres are getting left out, I understand. They may not want their students to pick up a romance and read about sexual content found in them. Or they may understand that most books within a certain genre were not made for studying purposes. Horrors and thrillers may also be too unsettling for some people. But the main issue that I have, especially with what I currently write and was writing during high school at the time, why no fantasy? I found this baffling during a time where fantasy is literally everywhere. Everywhere except where we were studying it. It's not like the genre wasn't new. There's plenty of fantasy classics from pre-2000s that we would have eaten up like chocolate. Do they think the fantasy elements are like distracting from the things that we're actually supposed to be studying? Because it is not, I tell you. It would enhance it. It is enhancing it. It makes it fun and digestible. It makes English class worth studying. The mentality of fantasy being unserious was what put me off taking English or creative writing as a major in a Bachelor of Arts at university. It feels like pretentious elitism to not include these kinds of stories when you're studying them because of how many flimin' fantasy stories exist. Deep within fantasy stories can be such provoking commentary about so many things about our world and our history and our human conditions. Legendborn by Tracy Deonn is one such novel that I would want people to study in high school. It is set against a backdrop of overcoming grief, fighting the modern impacts of colonization, and dealing with generational trauma. And a lot of themes that are relevant for teens. The magic doesn't make this a deterrent. It enhances them so much. But if you're looking for something older, because that book was only published in 2020, I've been loving his dark materials for all of the real-world connections and explorations within them. It is bold for its time, still somehow bold today, and remains relevant. And even though it is just the start of a trilogy, and also Legendborn, book 1 still has its own really well-written contained story that would be an excellent snippet for teens to study. It could even get them to continue the trilogy outside of class, which I think English teachers would want to do. They'd want to read books that their students would, keep reading and, want to keep their students reading good stuff. Making reads accessible. I found that a lot of the books that myself and other people taking English in other classes that weren't mine had the potential to trigger some people, and we were never warned of that. One such book was A Thousand Splendid Suns, a book that contained vivid depictions of domestic violence set in pre-2000s Afghanistan. I studied this in year 12, my second to last year of high school. I didn't find the fact that we weren't warned about domestic violence in this book to be an issue back then, but I do find it an issue in retrospect, especially given the rate of domestic violence cases in New Zealand. Some content may have hit too close to home for some students, and I do not remember us being warned about it at all. This content definitely had the potential to trigger some people by result. This is something that I was noticing as I became more senior in my English classes. The content within these stories turns darker and more distressing the further up in the curriculum you get. I'm wondering if this is because people associate darker content with maturity and adult level reading. And sure, a lot of these darker subjects can be important subjects to read about, but the content can also be quite distressing. I think teachers need to consider triggering content more when selecting their texts. They don't have to eliminate them, but maybe they should put some safety tools in place like DMs for Dungeons and Dragons have been doing more and more of these days. One thing I would suggest is students anonymously filling out an online form to have tick boxes of things that they would be comfortable with reading and things that they won't be comfortable with reading. Potentially also with an open box of text to include anything as well. This will allow the teachers to collect answers of safe and unsafe content without breaching the privacy of their students. Thus, they will be able to pick any kind of book, film, or poem that the class will be able to enjoy without feeling distress. Or you could just choose adult level reading that wouldn't have any triggering content in it. Something like the Japanese and Korean healing fiction that's become popular these days. I have a couple of my TBR that I can't wait to read, like Days at the Murasaki Bookshop, and I'm under the impression that they will make good stories to study. Pick texts to make your class succeed. You know that comment about the teachers and me being pro teachers that I made earlier? I'd say it applies to every teacher except for one. Teachers that set their students up to fail. What's the point of you being a teacher if you don't like working with kids and teens? Don't you want other people to enjoy the subject that you're studying and become super passionate about it? So why are you not doing the work to guarantee that they will be interested and they will be guaranteed to pass? This leads into probably my most hated choice for a written text in high school. King Lear by William Shakespeare. A play. Here's the fucking thing about Shakespeare. It was not made to be read. We studied this for a written text assignment in high school. We didn't even read the text of the play. Our teacher put up a pro shot of a Shakespeare play, the King Lear Shakespeare play, for us to watch and analyze through there instead of reading it. Which entirely defeats the purpose of doing a written text assignment! To be clear, I am not calling Shakespeare bad now, but back then, because we were studying it for written text, it definitely made me hate Shakespeare. I have since then seen many clips and plays and scenes from Shakespeare, and I find it now enjoyable. What I don't find enjoyable is the teachers not understanding that for a written text assignment, we need to consume a text that was made to be consumed in the written form and not something that was made to be perceived in the visual format. We have an entirely separate assignment for that where we study plays and films. I never had the goal to protest this directly to my English teacher because I wasn't in therapy then. I was such a nerd that I instead publicly decided to choose a different book from the script for the King Lear play. It was The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. Instead of studying the actual play, I spent class time reading it while the movie was on, referencing Spark Notes to help me learn about the different themes and stuff that I could draw out of it that I missed, and then ended up writing my essay for it and passing it anyway without the teacher's help. I think it was that moment that I decided for the speech competition to make an entire speech about how the school and education system, at least in New Zealand, doesn't set us up to succeed in real life. Maybe that's what got me top in English for the year, because I was that much of a nerd. Basically what I'm saying is that English teachers need to know the purpose of the preferred medium for all of these texts. And they also need to be on our side when selecting these pieces and studying the material that the ministry will say they need to have. Like my English teacher in year 13 literally said he chose the hardest Shakespeare play to study. I don't know why he did that, let alone choose a play. And we were the only English class that year studying Shakespeare. I also don't know why he did that. And that is why I went off to Google what other students were studying at year 13 to pick out a book that we would do. That I would do. I don't think anybody else did that. I think most people just dropped that exam. But it was the best decision I made in my life to choose The Book Thief because it ended up being one of my favorite books of all time. Now, thank you for following me on this journey and on this rant. I'd like you to share your thoughts in the comments if you have studied these books as well, or talk about any of the other books that you studied in school and whether you thought they were good books to study, you were interested in them, what have you. And what books you wish you studied in school maybe. I could also make a video in the future talking about the films that we ended up studying because that was another thing that I did, especially doubly for me because I was also taking media studies at the same time as English. Let me know if you want to do that. And also a thing that I think would be cool to have happen is if people who wrote their books that they think could be studied in English class could also write their own companion studying material rather than letting curriculum do that. I think that would be a great way for you to support English classes and stuff. I think it would be cool. There's definitely books that I am planning that I would do in the future, but not the current books that I have. I don't think they're quite English level studying yet, but other books I do have planned I think would be cool to do. Because that's the #1 way that's going to help people pass English. You literally give them the cheat codes to your book. So with that out of the way, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you're interested in fantasy content, even though, well, I did touch on fantasy content a little bit in this video actually, so yes, I'm still on brand. Share this with an English teacher that's your friend to let them know that they're appreciated, and once you do that, hug a teacher, and I will see you in another world.